The champagne glass slipped from my fingers during Marcus's best man speech, crystals shattering against the marble floor of the country club ballroom as 300 guests erupted in laughter at what they thought was harmless wedding humor. And let's be honest, we all know Marcus has a type, Derek was saying into the microphone, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. Remember Jessica from college? Blonde, bubbly, completely devoted to him. And then there was Amanda from law school, same story. And now our beautiful bride, Sarah, who fits the pattern perfectly. More laughter. Knowing chuckles from Marcus's fraternity brothers, amused titters from my sorority sisters. Indulgent smiles from our parents, who thought this was all part of the traditional roasting that came with wedding speeches. But I wasn't laughing. I was remembering the conversation I'd overheard 3 weeks ago, when I'd come home early from my bachelorette party planning session and found Marcus on the phone in his study, door cracked just enough for his words to carry into the hallway. I know, she's perfect on paper. Sweet, pretty, comes from the right family. She'll make a good wife, a good mother. She'll never question anything, never challenge me, never make waves. A pause, then, no, Derek, that's not love. That's convenience. But sometimes convenience is enough, right? Sometimes safe is better than sorry. The best part is, Derek continued, his speech building to what was clearly meant to be a heartwarming conclusion, Marcus finally found someone who won't try to change him. Someone who accepts him exactly as he is. Someone who'll never give him any trouble. The crowd awed appreciatively. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. Marcus's father raised his glass in approval. And I sat there in my $1,000 wedding dress, surrounded by everyone I loved, feeling like I was watching my own funeral. Because Derek wasn't wrong. I was exactly the type of woman Marcus had always chose, agreeable, accommodating, grateful to be selected by someone so successful and charming. I'd spent our entire 2-year relationship being the perfect girlfriend. Never arguing, never demanding, never pushing back when he made decisions about our life without consulting me. I'd thought it was love. I'd thought his certainty about what he wanted meant he was sure about wanting me. But sitting there listening to Derek catalog my predecessor's identical qualities, blonde, bubbly, devoted, I realized I wasn't special. I wasn't chosen. I was just the latest in a series of interchangeable women who met his criteria for a suitable wife. So here's to Marcus and Sarah, Derek concluded, raising his champagne flute high. May you have a lifetime of peaceful, uncomplicated happiness. The crowd rose to their feet, applauding and cheering. Marcus stood beside me, beaming, accepting congratulations and backslaps from his groomsmen. He leaned down to kiss my cheek, and I could smell his cologne, the same expensive scent he'd worn since college. The same scent that had probably lingered on Jessica and Amanda and whoever else had come before me. Great speech, right? He whispered in my ear. Derek really nailed it. He certainly did, I managed, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. The band started playing again, and couples began moving toward the dance floor. Marcus extended his hand to me with that confident smile that had first caught my attention at a law firm mixer 18 months ago. Shall we, Mrs. Patterson? Mrs. Patterson, the name I'd been practicing writing for months, the identity I'd been so eager to claim. Now it felt like a costume that didn't fit, a role I'd auditioned for without understanding the script. I took his hand because 300 people were watching. Because the photographer was positioned to capture our first dance as husband and wife. Because I didn't know what else to do with the knowledge that was burning in my chest like acid. As we swayed to at last, a song I'd chosen because I thought it represented finding my soulmate. Marcus held me close and whispered sweet nothings in my ear. The same sweet nothings he'd probably whispered to Jessica and Amanda. The same practiced romance that had worked on a series of blonde, bubbly, devoted women who'd never given him any trouble. I love you, Mrs. Patterson, he murmured against my hair. I love you too, I heard myself say. The words automatic, expected, empty. Over his shoulder, I could see Derek at the bar, accepting congratulations on his speech from other groomsmen. He looked pleased with himself, clearly believing he'd delivered exactly the kind of roast that would be remembered fondly for years to come. He had no idea he'd just revealed the truth about my marriage before it was even an hour old. You're quiet, Marcus said, pulling back to look at my face. Everything okay? Just overwhelmed, I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. It's been such a big day, the biggest. And it's just the beginning, he spun me gently. And I caught a glimpse of our guests watching us with indulgent smiles, probably thinking how perfect we looked together. How well matched we were. Perfect. Well matched. All the words people had been using to describe us for months. Words I'd taken as compliments, but now understood differently. We weren't perfect together because we complimented each other, because we challenged each other to grow, because we brought out the best in each other. We were perfect together because I was exactly what he'd ordered from the catalog of suitable wives. The song ended, and Marcus kissed me to enthusiastic applause from our guests. As we separated, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirrored wall behind the band, a blonde woman in white, smiling prettily, playing her part perfectly. Just like Jessica, just like Amanda, just like all the others who'd come before me and would probably come after. Me when I inevitably failed to remain bubbly and devoted enough to hold his interest. I need some air, I said suddenly. What? I need some air. Just for a minute. Marcus looked concerned, the way a man looks when his perfectly orchestrated event hits an unexpected snag. Sarah, are you feeling okay? Do you need to sit down? I'm fine. I just need a moment. I'll come with you. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended, and I saw Marcus's eyebrows raise in surprise. I'd never said no to him that firmly before. I mean, you should stay with our guests. I'll just be a minute. I walked toward the French doors that led to the country club's terrace, my train rustling behind me like whispered warnings. Behind me, I could hear the party continuing, laughter and music, and the clink of glasses, the sounds of people celebrating what they believed was a love story. But I knew better now. I knew that what they were celebrating was a successful transaction, a merger between two suitable parties, a continuation of a pattern that had been established long before I'd ever met Marcus Patterson. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The terrace was empty except for the October wind that cut through my dress like a blade. I wrapped my arms around myself, grateful for the cold that made my shivering seem like a response to weather rather than the slow collapse of everything I'd believed about my life. Through the French doors, I could see the reception continuing without me. Marcus was at the bar with his groomsmen, probably explaining that his new wife was just overwhelmed by the excitement of the day. My bridesmaids were clustered at our table, occasionally glancing toward the doors with expressions of mild concern. No one seemed particularly worried. After all, I was Sary's sweet, agreeable Sarah who never caused problems, never made scenes, never did anything unexpected. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through my text messages, looking for something I'd dismissed at the time but now seemed significant. There it was, from 2 months ago, a message from my college roommate Emma, who'd been Marcus's girlfriend briefly during our sophomore year. Hey girl, heard through the grapevine that you're marrying Marcus Patterson. Small world. Hope you're happy, but just wanted to say be yourself with him, okay? Don't try to be what you think he wants. Trust me on this one. I'd thought it was odd advice at the time. Of course I was being myself. Why would Emma think otherwise? But now, standing on this terrace in my wedding dress, I realized Emma had been trying to warn me. She'd recognized the pattern, had maybe even been part of it herself before she'd been replaced by the next blonde, bubbly, devoted woman in line. My phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. Congratulations on your wedding. This is Jessica Chun. We met at Marcus's law firm party last year. I just wanted to say you looked beautiful today. Take care of yourself. J. Jessica. The Jessica from Derek's speech. The one from college who'd fit the same pattern I was apparently continuing. I stared at the message, trying to remember meeting her, trying to understand why she was reaching out now. Another message appeared. I know this might seem strange, but if you ever want to talk to someone who understands, I'm here. No judgment, just ... understanding. My hands were shaking as I typed back, "Thank you. That's very kind." The response came immediately. Marcus is a good man, but he has a very specific idea of what he wants in a relationship. Just remember that you deserve to be loved for who you are, not for how well you fit a role. Stared at the screen. This message from a woman I barely remembered meeting. A woman who'd apparently walked this same path before me. How many of us were there? How many blonde, bubbly, devoted women had Marcus cycled through on his way to finding the perfect wife, Sarah? I turned to find my sister Kate approaching, her maid of honor dress fluttering in the wind. She looked concerned, and I realized I'd been out here longer than I'd intended. Everyone's wondering where you are. Marcus is starting to look worried. I'm fine. Just needed some air. Kate studied my face in the dim light from the ballroom. You don't look fine. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have. What do you mean? I showed her the messages from Jessica, watching Kate's expression change as she read them. Who is this? Marcus's ex-girlfriend from college. Apparently one of many who fit the exact same description as me. Sarah, what are you talking about? I told her about Derek's speech, about the conversation I'd overheard 3 weeks ago, about the slow realization that I wasn't special or chosen or loved for who I was just the latest model of the same type of woman Marcus had always preferred. Kate was quiet for a long time, processing this information. Sarah, are you sure you're not overthinking this? I mean, everyone has a type. Having a type is one thing. Treating women like interchangeable accessories is another. But Marcus loves you. I can see it when he looks at you. Does he? Or does he love the idea of me? The idea of having a wife who will never challenge him, never question him, never give him any trouble. Kate didn't answer immediately, and I could see her thinking back over the past 2 years. Probably remembering moments when Marcus had made decisions for both of us. Times when I'd deferred to his judgment without question. Instances when I'd molded myself to fit his expectations. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I don't know. Sarah, you just got married an hour ago. You can't be thinking of what? Of refusing to play a role I didn't know I was auditioning for? Of throwing away a marriage before it even starts based on one speech and some text messages from an ex-girlfriend? It's not just the speech, Kate. It's everything. It's the way he proposed without asking what kind of ring I wanted. It's the way he planned our honeymoon without consulting me about where I'd like to go. It's the way he assumes I'll quit my job when we have kids without ever discussing it with me. Those are just details. No, they're not just details. They're evidence of how he sees me. Not as a partner with my own thoughts and preferences, but as someone who will be grateful for whatever he decides to give me. Kate wrapped her arms around me, and I could feel her trying to comfort me, trying to find a way to make this better. Sarah, maybe you could talk to him. Maybe you could explain how you're feeling and say what? That I want him to love me for who I am instead of for how well I fit his predetermined criteria? That I want to be irreplaceable instead of interchangeable? Yes, exactly that. Kate, do you know what he said when he proposed? What? He said I was perfect. Not that he loved me, not that he couldn't imagine his life without me, but that I was perfect. And I thought it was romantic, but now I realize what he meant was that I was perfectly suited to be his wife, like a job applicant who meets all the qualifications. The French doors opened behind us, and Marcus appeared, his face creased with concern and something that might have been annoyance. There you are. Sarah, people are asking where you went. We need to cut the cake. I'll be right there. Are you feeling okay? You look pale. I'm fine. Just needed some air. Marcus stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne again. Could see the way he was cataloging my appearance, probably noting that my hair was slightly mussed from the wind, that my makeup might need touching up. You should come inside. It's cold out here, and you'll get sick. Another decision made for me, another assumption that he knew what was best. I looked at this man I'd married an hour ago, this man I'd thought I loved, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Marcus, I said carefully, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you choose me? He looked confused by the question. What do you mean? I mean, out of all the women you could have married, why me? Sarah, that's a strange question. I chose you because I love you. But why do you love me? Because you're perfect. You're everything I've ever wanted in a wife. What does that mean, exactly? Everything you've ever wanted? Marcus glanced at Kate, probably wondering why his new wife was interrogating him on their wedding day. It means you're beautiful and kind, and you make me happy. It means you understand what I need in a partner. And what do you need in a partner? Someone supportive. Someone who trusts my judgment. Someone who won't try to change me or make our relationship complicated. Each word landed like a small blow, confirming everything I'd realized during Derek's speech. I wasn't loved for my intelligence or my sense of humor or my dreams for the future. I was loved for my compliance, my agreeability, my willingness to be shaped into whatever he needed me to be. Sarah, what's this about? Marcus was starting to sound impatient. Our guests are waiting. I know they are. Then can we please go inside? We can talk about whatever this is later. Later. When we were alone, when there wasn't an audience, when he could manage the situation without public scrutiny. Just like he managed everything else in our relationship. Okay, I said finally. Let's go cut the cake. But as we walked back toward the ballroom, I knew that cutting the cake would be the last thing I did as Marcus Patterson's agreeable, uncomplicated wife. Because I was done being perfect. I was done being exactly what he'd ordered. I was done being replaceable. The cake cutting was a performance I sleepwalked through, smiling for the photographer while Marcus fed me a bite of vanilla buttercream, and everyone applauded our picture-perfect moment. But my mind was elsewhere, processing the messages from Jessica and trying to understand the full scope of what I'd stumbled into. As soon as the photos were finished, I excused myself to the ladies' room, claiming I needed to touch up my makeup. Instead, I locked myself in the elegant lounge area and called the number Jessica had texted from. She answered on the second ring. "Sarah, is everything okay? I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. How long were you with Marcus?" A pause. "About 8 months." "Why? And how did it end?" Another pause, longer this time. "Sarah, I'm not sure this is something you want to discuss on your wedding day." "I'm sure. Please, I need to understand." Jessica sighed. "It ended when I started having opinions. When I stopped being the easy, agreeable girlfriend he wanted and started being a real person with my own thoughts and needs." "What happened exactly?" "I got a promotion at work that would have required me to travel more." Quote, "When I told Marcus about it, he said I should turn it down because it would interfere with our relationship. When I said I wanted to take it anyway, he said I was being selfish and putting my career ahead of us." And I realized that us meant him, that our relationship only worked as long as I was willing to make myself smaller to fit into his life. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "So you broke up?" "He broke up with me. Said I'd changed, that I wasn't the woman he'd fallen in love with, that he needed someone who understood what partnership meant." "Partnership meaning what?" "Partnership meaning I would support his goals and he would let me." I closed my eyes, seeing my own future laid out like a roadmap. "Jessica, can I ask you something else?" "Sure." "Did he ever talk about marriage? About what kind of wife he wanted?" "All the time. He had very specific ideas about it. He wanted someone who would be a good hostess, who would look good at firm events, who would be a devoted mother but not so career-focused that it would interfere with family life." "Did he ever ask what you wanted?" "Not really. He assumed I wanted the same things he wanted. And for a while I thought I did. I thought I wanted to be the perfect girlfriend, the perfect wife. But it turns out I wanted to be myself more." "How many others were there?" "Before me?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, are you sure you want to know this?" "I'm sure. There was Amanda from law school. She lasted about a year. There was Rebecca from his first job, maybe 6 months. There's me. And I think there was someone between me and you, but I'm not sure of her name. All blonde, all agreeable. All willing to be whatever he needed us to be until we weren't anymore. I felt like I was going to be sick." "Jessica, why didn't you warn me? When you met me at that firm party, why didn't you say something?" "Because you seemed happy. Because I thought maybe you were different. Maybe you really were what he was looking for. And because... double quotes." She paused. "Because I wasn't sure you'd believe me. You were so clearly in love with him, so excited about your relationship. Who was I to tell you it was all an illusion? But you're telling me now, because I saw the wedding photos on social media, and you looked exactly like I felt on the day I thought Marcus might propose to me, like you were playing a role you didn't quite understand." I stared at myself in the mirror across from the lounge chair, taking in my blonde hair, my sweet smile, my perfectly appropriate wedding dress. I looked like every other woman Marcus had dated, like we'd all been ordered from the same catalog. "Sarah, are you okay?" "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Can I tell you something?" "What?" "Breaking up with Marcus was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because he's a bad person, he's not, but because it forced me to figure out who I was when I wasn't trying to be what someone else wanted." "What did you do?" "I took the promotion, I traveled. I dated men who liked me for my ambition, not despite it. I learned to have opinions and express them and not apologize for taking up space. And now I'm engaged to someone who fell in love with me because I'm complicated and challenging and completely myself. Someone who doesn't want me to be perfect. He wants me to be real." I felt tears starting to form, and I blinked them back quickly. I couldn't return to my reception with red eyes and smeared makeup. "Jessica, what should I do? I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that you deserve to be loved for who you are, not for how well you fit someone else's expectations. And if Marcus can't do that, then maybe he's not the right person for you." After we hung up, I sat in the ladies' room lounge for another 10 minutes, trying to process everything I'd learned. The pattern was clear now. Marcus didn't fall in love with women. He fell in love with the idea of women. Specifically, the idea of a woman who would be grateful to be chosen by him, who would never challenge his decisions or complicate his life. I thought about our relationship, about all the times I'd deferred to his judgment, all the times I'd swallowed my own opinions to keep the peace. I'd thought I was being a good girlfriend, a supportive partner. But I'd actually been auditioning for a role I didn't know existed. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "People are asking where you are. Marcus looks worried." I typed back, "Coming now." But before I left the lounge, I did something I'd never done before. I called my own number and left myself a voicemail. "Hi, it's me. It's your wedding day, and you just found out that your husband doesn't actually know who you are. He's in love with a version of you that you've been performing for 2 years. The question is, are you going to keep performing, or are you going to find out what happens when you stop?" I hung up and walked back to my reception, where my husband was waiting with that concerned expression he wore whenever I did something unexpected. As I approached our table, I could see him relax, probably relieved that his perfect wife was back to playing her part. "There you are," he said, standing to pull out my chair. I was starting to worry. "Sorry, I ran into an old friend." "Oh, anyone I know?" I really looked at him, and realized he had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to come apart. "Actually, yes," I said, sitting down and smoothing my dress. "You know her very well. Who was it? Jessica Chun? She wanted to congratulate us on our wedding." I watched Marcus's face carefully, saw the slight tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible stiffening of his shoulders. "That's nice of her. She had some interesting things to say about relationships, about the importance of being loved for who you really are, Sarah." "What?" "She also mentioned that you have very specific ideas about what you want in a wife." Marcus glanced around the table, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of this conversation. "Sarah, this isn't really the time or place. When would be the time and place, Marcus? When would be a good time to discuss the fact that I'm apparently just the latest in a series of interchangeable blonde girlfriends?" The words hung in the air between us like an accusation. Around our table, conversations had quieted as people sensed tension they didn't understand. "Sarah, you're being ridiculous." "Am I? Then tell me, Marcus, what is it about me specifically that you love? Not that I'm perfect, not that I fit your criteria for a wife, but what is it about me as an individual that you can't live without?" Marcus stared at me, and I could see him struggling to find an answer that wasn't just a variation of "you're exactly what I ordered." You're kind," he said finally. "So is Jessica. So is Amanda. So were all the others." "Sarah, I don't know what Jessica told you, but she told me the truth. That you don't fall in love with women, you fall in love with the idea of women. And when the real woman starts to show through, you move on to the next one. That's not true, isn't it?" I stood up, suddenly feeling like I couldn't breathe in the beautiful ballroom surrounded by all these people celebrating what they thought was a love story. "I need some air," I said again. But this time, I wasn't coming back. I was halfway across the ballroom when Marcus caught up with me, his hand closing around my wrist with just enough pressure to make me stop. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? You're embarrassing both of us." "I'm embarrassing us?" I turned to face him, and something in my expression made him drop his hand. "Marcus, do you know what Derek said in his speech? He said nice things about our relationship. He said you finally found someone who won't try to change you. Someone who accepts you exactly as you are. Someone who will never give you any trouble. And that's bad because... because it means you didn't marry me, Marcus. You married a role. You married the idea of a compliant wife who'll never challenge you or complicate your... life." Marcus glanced around the ballroom, clearly aware that we were starting to attract attention. "Sarah, can we please discuss this privately?" "Why? Because you're worried about what people will think? Because it might complicate your perfect image? Because this is our wedding reception, and you're acting like what? Like a real person with real feelings, instead of the agreeable doll you thought you were marrying." The words came out louder than I'd intended, and I saw several guests turn to look at us. Marcus's face flushed with embarrassment and something that looked like anger. "You're being irrational, am I? Or am I being myself for the first time in 2 years? This isn't you, Sarah. You don't cause scenes. You don't make everything about drama. You're right. I don't. The Sarah you married doesn't do any of those things. But maybe the Sarah you married isn't real." I could see Derek approaching from across the room, probably sensing that his best man duties were needed. Behind him, my parents were watching with expressions of confusion and growing alarm. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable, "you're obviously upset about something. Why don't we go somewhere quiet and you can tell me what's really bothering you?" "What's really bothering me is that you just proved my point." "What point?" "That you think there's something wrong with me for having feelings about this. That you think I'm being irrational for questioning our relationship instead of just accepting whatever you decide is best for us." Derek reached us, his face creased with concern. "Hey, everything okay here?" "Everything's fine," Marcus said quickly. "Sarah's just feeling overwhelmed." "I'm not overwhelmed," I said, looking directly at Derek. "I'm having a moment of clarity." "About what?" Derek asked, clearly confused. "About your speech. About how you described me as someone who'll never give Marcus any trouble. About how you cataloged all his previous girlfriends who fit the exact same description." Derek's face went pale. "Sarah, you didn't mean to reveal that I'm just the latest model of the same type of woman Marcus has always dated? You didn't mean to make it clear that I'm replaceable? That's not what I meant at all. Then what did you mean?" "Derek, when you said Marcus finally found someone who won't try to change him, what exactly were you celebrating?" Derek looked helplessly at Marcus, clearly realizing he'd stepped into something much bigger than wedding speech humor. "I was celebrating that he found someone who loves him for who he is," Derek said finally. "No," I said quietly. "You were celebrating that he found someone who'll never challenge him to grow. Someone who'll accept whatever he decides without question. Someone who'll be grateful to be chosen, instead of expecting to be valued." By now, we'd attracted a small crowd. My parents had joined us, along with Marcus's parents and several of our friends. Everyone was trying to understand what was happening, why the bride was having what appeared to be a breakdown at her own reception. "Sarah, honey," my mother said gently, "maybe you should sit down. You've had a long day." "I've had a long 2 years," I said. 2 years of being the perfect girlfriend, the perfect fiancée, the perfect woman for Marcus. And I just realized that perfect means not real. "Sarah, you're being dramatic," Marcus said, his voice tight with frustration. "Can we please handle this like adults? How would you like to handle it, Marcus? Should I go back to smiling and nodding and pretending I don't have opinions? Should I keep being the agreeable wife you ordered from the catalog? You're not making any sense." "I'm making perfect sense. For the first time in our relationship, I'm making perfect sense." I looked around at the circle of concerned faces, at all these people who'd come to celebrate what they thought was a love story, and realized I owed them an explanation. "I'm sorry," I said, addressing the group. "I know this isn't what anyone expected from tonight, but I just learned something about my marriage that I think you should know too." "Sarah, don't," Marcus said sharply. "Don't what? Don't tell the truth. Don't admit that our perfect relationship is built on me pretending to be someone I'm not? You're not pretending to be anyone. You're exactly who I fell in love with. That's the problem, Marcus. You fell in love with a performance. You fell in love with a woman who never disagreed with you, never challenged you, never had needs that conflicted with yours. But that woman isn't real. She's real to me, because you never bothered to look deeper. You never asked what I wanted, what I dreamed about, what I needed from a partner. You just assumed I wanted whatever you were willing to give me." Marcus's father stepped forward, clearly trying to defuse the situation. "Sarah, I think maybe you're both just tired. It's been a stressful day and emotions are running high, Mr. Patterson. With all due respect, this isn't about stress. This is about the fact that your son has been dating the same woman over and over again, just in different bodies." "That's enough," Marcus said, his voice sharp with anger. "Sarah, you're embarrassing yourself." "No, Marcus. I'm finally being myself. And I can see why that would be embarrassing for you, since yourself is apparently not what you signed up for." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man I'd thought I loved. This man I'd married 3 hours ago, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Not because he'd changed, but because I'd never actually seen him clearly before. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "What?" "If I took that promotion at work, the one that would require me to travel more, would you support me?" "Sarah, we've never discussed. I'm discussing it now. If I wanted to take a job that would mean less time for hosting dinner parties and attending firm events, would you be okay with that?" Marcus was quiet, and I could see him realizing this was a trap, that any answer he gave would prove my point. "We would discuss it," he said finally. Discuss it meaning you would explain why it wasn't a good idea for our relationship? Discuss it meaning we would make a decision together. A decision that you would make and I would agree to. Sarah, that's not fair. It's completely fair. It's the most fair I've been in 2 years. I turned to address the crowd that had gathered around us. I'm sorry for ruining your evening. I know you came here to celebrate a wedding, and instead you're witnessing the end of a marriage that should never have started. Sarah, stop, my mother said, tears in her eyes. You're just upset. Tomorrow you'll regret. Tomorrow I'll regret staying in a marriage where I have to pretend to be someone else, where I have to be grateful for being chosen instead of expecting to be valued. I looked at Marcus one more time. This man who'd thought he was marrying his perfect wife, who'd had no idea he was marrying a woman who was slowly suffocating under the weight of his expectations. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry I'm not who you thought I was. But I'm not sorry for finally figuring out who I actually am. And who is that? He asked, his voice bitter. Someone who deserves to be loved for her complications, not despite them. Someone who deserves a partner who wants to know her thoughts, not just her compliance. Someone who deserves to be irreplaceable, not interchangeable. I started walking toward the exit, my train trailing behind me like a white flag of surrender. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of shocked conversations, the sound of a perfect evening dissolving into chaos. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, reading the email that had just arrived in my inbox. The subject line read, "Thank you for saving my life. Dear Sarah, you don't know me, but I was at your wedding reception. I'm Derek's cousin, and I watched what happened that night with a mixture of shock and admiration. I wanted you to know that what you did, walking away from a marriage that wasn't real, choosing truth over comfort, it changed my life. I've been engaged to someone for 8 months, and I've been having doubts I couldn't name. After watching you that night, I realized what my doubts were about. Like you, I've been playing a role, being who I thought he wanted me to be instead of who I actually am. Last week I broke off my engagement. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most honest. I wanted to thank you for showing me what courage looks like, for demonstrating that it's better to be alone and authentic than partnered and pretending. I hope you're happy. I hope you're living as yourself." With gratitude, Amanda, I smiled, remembering that night 6 months ago when I'd walked out of my own wedding reception in my $1,000 dress, leaving behind a marriage that had lasted exactly 4 hours and a life that had never really been mine. The divorce had been surprisingly simple. Marcus had been so eager to avoid public scrutiny that he'd agreed to an uncontested dissolution, citing irreconcilable differences. He'd kept the house, I'd kept my dignity, and we'd both kept our mouths shut about the details. I'd moved to Portland 2 months later, taking a job with a nonprofit that focused on women's empowerment. It paid less than my previous position, but it fed my soul in a way that corporate law never had. I'd also started writing essays about identity and authenticity and the courage to disappoint people who love you for the wrong reasons. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Coffee tomorrow? I'm in town for a conference." I typed back, "Absolutely. Can't wait to catch up." Jessica and I had become unlikely friends in the months since my wedding disaster. She'd been the first person to reach out after the story made the local society page's "Local attorney's wedding ends in dramatic split," offering support and understanding from someone who'd walked a similar path. Through Jessica, I'd met other women who'd escaped similar situations, women who'd realized they were being loved for their compliance rather than their complexity, who'd chosen authenticity over acceptance, who'd learned that being alone was better than being unknown. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" I looked up to see a woman about my age, holding a coffee cup and gesturing to the empty chair across from me. She had dark hair, laugh lines around her eyes, and the kind of confident posture that suggested she'd never spent 2 years pretending to be someone else. "Please sit," I said, closing my laptop. "Thanks. I'm sorry to bother you, but I couldn't help noticing you're reading The Awakening. It's one of my favorite books. Mine too. I'm actually teaching it in a women's literature class I'm leading at the community center." "Really? Sounds amazing." "I'm Rachel, by the way. Sarah." We talked for an hour about books and teaching and the courage it takes to live authentically. Rachel was a therapist who specialized in helping women find their voices after years of silencing themselves. She was funny and opinionated and completely comfortable taking up space in the world. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said as we were getting ready to leave. Sure. You mentioned you moved here from back east. What brought you to Portland? I considered how to answer, how much of my story to share with someone I just met. 6 months ago I would have deflected, given a vague answer about wanting a change of scenery. I left my husband at our wedding reception, I said simply. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. Wow, that must have been quite a story. It was. I realized I'd been playing a role for 2 years, being who I thought he wanted me to be instead of who I actually was. When I finally saw the pattern clearly, I couldn't go through with it. That must have taken incredible courage. It felt more like survival. I realized I was disappearing, becoming this agreeable, uncomplicated version of myself that wasn't really me at all. And now I'm complicated and opinionated and sometimes difficult, and I'm happier than I've ever been. Rachel smiled. I like complicated women. They're more interesting. So do I. It took me 28 years to figure that out. As we exchanged numbers and made plans to meet again, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, blonde, bubbly, devoted, desperate to be chosen by someone who'd never bothered to know her. That woman felt like a character I'd played in a movie, someone I'd inhabited but never really been. The woman I was, now brunette, I dyed my hair the week after the divorce. Opinionated, challenging, comfortable with being alone, felt real in a way I'd never experienced before. My phone rang as I was walking home. Kate's name appeared on the screen. Hey sis. Hey, how are you doing? Good. Really good. I just had coffee with someone interesting. A someone, or just someone? Just someone. But a really great someone, I'm glad. You sound happy. I'm happy. Genuinely, authentically happy. Good, you deserve that. Kate had been my biggest supporter through the divorce. The one person who'd understood immediately why I'd walked away. She'd also been the one to point out that I'd been performing a version of myself for most of our lives, not just with Marcus. Kate, can I tell you something? Always. I got an email today from someone who was at the wedding. She said watching me walk away gave her the courage to end her own engagement. How does that make you feel? Proud, scared, responsible, like maybe what happened that night mattered beyond just my own life? It did matter. Sarah, what you did, choosing truth over comfort, authenticity over acceptance, it was brave. And brave acts inspire other people to be brave too. After we hung up, I sat in my small apartment, my apartment, chosen by me, decorated according to my taste, filled with books I actually wanted to read, and thought about the ripple effects of courage. I'd walked away from my wedding reception 6 months ago thinking I was just saving myself from a life of pretending. But maybe I'd done something bigger. Maybe I'd shown other women that it was possible to choose authenticity over acceptance, to value being known over being chosen. My laptop chimed with a new email. Subject line read, Speaking Opportunity. Dear Ms. Patterson, I'm writing to invite you to speak at our upcoming conference on women's empowerment. We've heard about your story and would love to have you share your experience with our audience. The theme of this year's conference is choosing authenticity, and we believe your perspective would be invaluable to women who are struggling to find their voices in relationships and careers. Please let me know if you'd be interested in participating. Best regards, Dr. Maria Santos, Director, Women's Leadership Institute. I stared at the email, this invitation to turn my personal disaster into something that might help other women. 6 months ago, the idea of speaking publicly about my failed marriage would have horrified me. Now, it felt like an opportunity to give meaning to the pain. I typed back, I'd be honored to participate. That evening, I called my parents for our weekly check-in. The conversation had been awkward at first. They'd been devastated by the divorce, confused by my choices, worried about my future. But gradually, they'd come to understand that their daughter was happier alone and authentic than married and pretending. How are you, sweetheart? My mother asked. I'm good, Mom. Really good. You sound different. Lighter. I feel lighter. I feel like myself. I'm glad. Your father and I. We've been talking about that night, about what you said about being loved for who you are instead of who someone wants you to be, and we realized we might have contributed to that pattern. We might have taught you to be agreeable instead of authentic. Mom, no, let me say this. We're proud of you, Sarah. We're proud that you had the courage to walk away from something that looked perfect but felt wrong. We're proud that you chose yourself. After we hung up, I sat on my couch with a cup of tea and thought about the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. The journey from agreeable to authentic hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. I thought about Marcus, who'd remarried 3 months after our divorce to a woman who looked remarkably like me, blonde, bubbly, devoted. I hoped she was genuinely happy being exactly what he wanted. I hoped she never had to choose between being loved and being known. But mostly, I thought about the future, about the speaking engagement, about my new friendship with Rachel, about the possibility of building a life where I was valued for my complications rather than loved despite them. 6 months ago, I'd walked out of my own wedding reception. Tonight, I was finally walking into my own life.